So we originally came out to look at this boiler because we've had so many issues with the Pentair heaters. When we got here, we found a lot. The burners and heat exchangers were full of soot, and the burners were actually overheating, so they were curved and starting to break apart and warp. Pentair was being really slow to get us any warranty parts, so we actually pulled the whole burner tray out of another boiler we had at the shop and installed it here. We also had a problem with the manual reset high limit tripping and causing the boiler to lock out. When we looked into it, we found that the automatic reset high limit was actually set at a higher temperature than your manual reset. So if there's ever a flow issue, which there was, this manual reset would lock the boiler out before the automatic reset ever had a chance to open. Once we got everything cleaned up, we looked into why there's so much soot in the first place. If you take the BTUs per hour of this boiler, and this boiler, and this boiler, and this boiler, and add it all up together, you can do a little math problem, and it tells you how much combustion air that you need to support all of the flames. If you don't know how to do that, you can just ask ChatGPT to do it for you, and it'll figure it out. What we determined is this louver and this outside air louver down here are the only points where fresh air actually gets into the building, and that's just over half the amount of air required to operate all these gas appliances. So one of the things that we did to keep everything running within its operational limits is we installed this control box. This red light here is a call for heat from the boiler. This red light here is sending a signal from the controller to turn the boiler on. This is really just an elaborate relay that can turn on and off the boiler. If the boiler goes into alarm, this red light lights up. What the controller is checking for is it's reading inlet temperature, outlet temperature, and the temperature of the pool. So it's really important that our inlet temperature stays 110 degrees. That prevents condensation on the heat exchanger. The outlet temperature has to be below 142, and the delta T, temperature difference between the inlet and outlet, has to be between 10 and 37 degrees. If we're not maintaining all of those conditions, after 15 minutes of runtime, the boiler shuts off and it's off for 99 minutes. With all of that installed, we set our flow valves to maintain the proper inlet and outlet temperatures, get the delta T that we needed. We found we had an extremely hard time doing this. It's very sensitive. Adjusting these valves is a game of millimeters. And I think that's because in the manual it's specified rather, to keep these pipes within 15 feet of the main pool loop. On this particular job, these pipes are probably closer to 115 feet away from the pool loop. In a typical situation, to adjust these valves on a Pentair unit, this is your inlet valve. This is pool water going into the boiler. Leave this valve completely open. On a typical installation, you leave this valve, your bypass, completely open. This one's partially closed right now because, like I said earlier, the distance between the boiler and the main pool loop exceeds what the manual says it should be, so this is what we had to do. But typically, you would leave this valve completely open. This is your outlet valve. It's going back to your pool. This is hot water. If the pool temperature if the inlet temperature is below 110 degrees, you close this valve off very slightly. That creates back pressure. Water's trying to leave, it creates back pressure. The pressure will force the water this way and into your inlet temperature. That's what maintains that 110 degree inlet. If you're over 110 degrees, you just open this up a little bit, creates less back pressure, less hot water goes back to your inlet, and more of it goes back to your pool. It bounces back and forth to maintain 110 degrees. This is your pop-off valve. If the pressure in the boiler ever gets too high, this opens up and relieves the pressure and keeps it from damaging itself. In North Carolina, you have to have a temperature and pressure pop-off valve. So what that means is either the pressure can open the valve, or if the temperature ever reaches 210 degrees, it opens up the valve. The reason why they have that is because they're worried about swimmers on the discharge side of this pipe swimming past and burning their legs. So this opens at 210. While we were working, the customer came in and told us that they're having a hard time keeping the pool at the proper temperature, and they were wondering if we could adjust like the deadband or the set point differential in the thermostat in the boiler. Well, that's kind of unusual, so that got my attention. We started looking into it, and we found this is our temperature sensor. Because we installed a T and a bell reducer and then a dry well, the sensor is actually sticking out probably about right here, which means it's not in the actual flow of water. So it probably worked fine while it was warmer out, but as it gets colder outside and then colder in this room, this pipe is colder than the flow of water. So the boiler stays running longer and longer and longer. Their pool actually got up to 90 degrees the other day. Next thing I wanted to tell you about is all pool equipment is supposed to be bonded together. That's to keep, in case any piece of pool equipment shorts, you don't electrify the water. Everything has to be bonded together with a copper wire. This is an example. There's a copper wire attached right here on the wall, and it's bonded to the pump. All pool equipment, all pumps, boilers, anything electrical is all supposed to be bonded together in a big circle, and then it gets put to a grounding rod. So that's everything. I hope that was helpful if you ever come across one of these Pentairs in the field again.